It has been difficult for me to get through this book, not in the least because I started a different philosophy book that is equally dense and deals with heavy topics, as does this one. Well, the question, as the title suggests, is the search for meaning in one's life, and especially for myself, coming from a more nihilistic point of view, let's say by Camus or Nietzsche. It's a clash, to say the least, but there are a lot of commonalities that I enjoyed as well. Frankl himself mentions a lot of Nietzsche ideas and quotes that helped him get through his experience at Auschwitz and his further stay at the Bavarian camps. And he keeps mentioning this one quote by Nietzsche, which is if you have a why to live, then you can bear almost anyhow. It's an interesting concept. I'm sure I'll get into it. And I can just backtrack a bit. I have a bunch of notes that I've written down on my notebook. I have some notes on my Kindle. I have some notes on my Notion page. So I'll cycle through all of this. It's I can already tell that this is going to be a longer video, so apologies for that if you were looking for a quick review, but I just wanted to be comprehensive in all of this and hopefully not leave much out, especially because this is the ultimate question, the meaning of life. So I don't want to take it lightly, and neither should you if you are reading this book in any serious capacity. The book is divided into two parts. Uh, I think the first one is more hard hitting, so to say, because those are the personal experiences, first hand experiences that our author has lived through in the concentration camps. And it is clearly the extremes of human depravity that you are confronted with, and how you explain that and how you push through the day just for survival. It is extremely hard hitting, but I also enjoyed the second part, which is a more psychiatrist doctor point of view, which our author is, luckily. So we get to see how the mindset controls the body, how you can use this knowledge to help other people find meaning in their life and in their suffering. And it's basically a lesson to take away from, not only just read a story in the first part, but also dive extensively into the psyche of the sufferer, in this case, the camp prisoners, and maybe have some takeaways that can be applied to other people, say us normal people in our everyday life as well. So it's a very interesting book, a very important book that you all should read if you constantly deal with finding purpose, or if you are feeling generally lost in that pursuit of happiness or meaning. We can start here. The basic premise of the book is that we cannot control the things that happen to us. Life is unfair. You might be in the best of your health, have everything you need, and still something in you is incomplete, or you already are in a position that you don't have even the basic necessities met, and your mind strives only towards that, as is the case with the concentration camps. But you still have nothing to look forward to, no goal or no meaning. And what the author says is that in both of these cases, whether you have the material things you need or not, whether you are suffering or not, you will not find fulfillment in your life or satisfaction in your life until you have a meaning towards which you are working. And if you don't have any of the other things and you only have that meaning, let's say some idea, some work you need to finish, or some things that you need to see before you die, let's say, then you will bear almost anyhow, which is the Nietzsche quote that I just mentioned some minutes ago. So that is the basic premise. Now, given this premise, where does that lead us? It begs the question, first, where will you find this meaning? And there are three obvious things that he says you can do this. First is love. This should be obvious. Many people have their loved ones surrounding them, and you will give up your life for them, which means that you will suffer for them, which means you have a purpose that is outside of yourself, that you can attach to, and that keeps you going. And this is in contrast to many of the modern psychological, psychotherapeutic work that today's psychiatrists do, which is they will tell you to meditate, they will tell you to introspect, they will tell you to journal, which is all the same thing. You are taking a journey inside of yourself to find some intrinsic meaning to life, which again can be shaped by circumstances you were brought up with or that you aspire towards. But in either case, the meaning is held within you, is what modern psychiatry and psychology preaches. But author says that this might not be true in its entirety. Obviously, for some people it might work, but for others who have this belief that life is inherently meaningless, that all of human existence is a happy accident, it's a glitch in the matrix, let's say. If you are from that school of thought, then the thought that you can find meaning within yourself is jarring, it is absurd. So for those people, you have to look outside. You have to look at, well, the three things: work, you can find meaning in your work or the product of your work. You can find meaning in the people surrounding you, or maybe even things that you love, let's say nature or plants or art, for example. You can live your life that like that, or even in suffering. The suffering part is a much deeper topic that I'll get into later. But you have three basic things that you can find your meaning in. And again, this is not to say that these are the only three things where you'll find meaning, but the overall umbrella idea that the author is trying to say is that whether you have achieved anything or you are looking for achievement, that doesn't define a good, fulfilling, satisfying life. But if you have meaning and you have not achieved anything, if you have meaning and you have achieved everything, then and only then will you yourself feel that fulfillment that life is supposed to feel. There's a very interesting scene where the author is taking a walk. This is after liberation, by the way, maybe a couple of years later, where he is walking down an empty countryside trail, and there comes a moment where he just breaks down and goes down on his knees and he just starts crying because he found his meaning in the Lord. And this again is a critique of mine that, again, I'm not as religious as this author is, but for some people, if that is how you find your meaning, then it makes life worth living, and that is all that matters in the end. Again, for some people, this religious aspect might be jarring, like I said, it was for me. But if you have something else in your life that can give you that meaning, then hold on to that, because without that meaning, you will not keep going. The people in these concentration camps, prisoner camps, they obviously had no material things. They were stripped naked and everything was taken from them except for that one hope in their mind that one day they will be liberated. They will go back to their hometowns and see their old friends and tell them stories. And again, the cases are so obvious that there are some people who, even after so much introspection, could not get themselves to work, and they gave up on that dream of liberation and of things changing. And this is because of the extreme circumstances they were in, without any food, without anything, any health doctors. They were forced to work for hours and hours together in brutal conditions under practically dictators who would whip them at the slightest of inconsistencies, let's say. So, because of that, they lost complete, utter hope in any possible future to look towards. They had no meaning, and therefore they died. They could have continued on with the resources they were given, as many other people did, but they chose to give up that hope, that meaning, and so they died. This is so clear in, and this is one of the good things about the book, that we are lucky to have a person who is as precise in his understanding of the psyche of the prisoner, that he is able to relate all of this to scientific terms and to debate with Nietzsche's ideas or Camus' ideas, that we get an almost philosophical book. And if I had to categorize this book, that's what the ninth point I had written here was, is that the first part of the book reads like 1984, basically. It's state controlled everything. You don't have even the slightest misstep will be detected by your camp guards and you will be whipped for it, or even worse, sent to the gas chambers. So, in such a situation, that is part one, you have a person who went through all of that, was able to analyze all of the different ways people react in, and you have a survivor of this concentration camp. So you know that all of this that the author is saying is from first hand experience, and it's not like, let's say, Karl Marx, or people say that Marx didn't even go to a single factory and he just wrote all of these books in his cozy room, let's say. Well, that is before he died poor. And there are other armchair psychologists who have done this, where they don't have the first hand experience and they write again PhD theses on how one should live their life when they haven't known suffering. But in this case, we know that the author suffered through all of this. And when he says that suffering must have meaning because otherwise, after liberation, you wouldn't be so happy, and I am happy. So, even that one case gives us the data point that tells us that suffering must have meaning, and we should listen to that when the author tells it to us in as precise and clear scientific terms as possible. There was one thing. Let's see what else I have written. I don't remember what Appi's tragedy is supposed to mean. Let's move on. Yeah, there's this other quote that salvation of man is through love, and in love, basically, love is the end all be all of everything, is the highest achievement a man can or a woman can attain or work towards. And it's really interesting. This is not a new idea in any sense. All of art, all of music, all of food, health, everything tells you that love is the answer. The Beatles tell you that. Give peace a chance and all of that. But is that the ultimate goal one can achieve? Is that the ultimate happiness one can achieve? I'm I'm not so sure. Again, because in every single case, love is the answer. I am prone to be biased towards it, that when I see it in life around me, I tend to agree more or less that this is the happiest one can be. But I feel it is just one of the aspects of a good life. I can find even more happiness in a good night's sleep or a hearty full meal, let's say. But all of that makes a whole life. If you only have love, let's say a partner that you live your entire life with, but you don't have the other things, would you be more happy than someone who has no one in his life? Let's say he's alone, but he has the best of meals every single day. Hard to compare the two, obviously, but the author makes a case for love being the ultimate attainment, or again, like the word that he uses is again very interesting, salvation. Really, that's uh, that's a bold word to use in this case, especially because love in itself is hard to define. What is true love? No one knows. Do you know it when you see it? That isn't clear either. But I can see the food at I'm eating. I can see my achievements on my resume, let's say. So again, hard to quantify love or suffering for that matter. But it is what it is. Let's move on. It's not too deep a topic that I want to go into. What else is there? Oh yeah, I was comparing this to 1984. Again, very interesting because in this case, this is again not fictional, so the case is different, but the state puts the prisoners in worse conditions than humanly imaginable. Do you realize how crazy that is? That humans, we didn't know that humans could stoop this low, and the state proves them wrong by doing absurdly terrifying and nightmarish things to these prisoners that the Overton window, or whatever that concept is, you push the line so far to the south that it is even hard to imagine. Now, when that is the case, isn't this isn't part one of this book a better dystopian novel than 1984 ever is? Well, there were torture chambers in 1984 that were made out to be the worst thing humanly imaginable, because again that is fictional, so you can push it as hard as you want, but it's very interesting how in real life you surpass even that. And look at the irony here, that in the, dare I say, mediocre torture chambers in 1984, the human breaks. But here, where the conditions are much worse, the mental torture is much worse, and yet there are some people who do survive that. How very interesting. Also, look at how the comparison works. It is said that in 1984, not a single person who is taken by the officers, by this big brother in this case, none of them fail to change their minds, which is what happens with our protagonist as well. In the end, he is broken and he is changed by the state because of all of that torture and malnutrition and such. But in this case, there is a 1 in 20 chance that you survive, which is what the author gives the lucky number as 1 in 20 or 1 in 28. I don't remember which one, but the odds are much better in a situation which is much worse than 1984. And this again brings me back to that popular saying that reality is stranger, crazier than fiction, and that again holds to be very true in this case. Very scary indeed, but very true also. The second part of the book is more or less applying the lessons learned from first the experiences in part one to other patients' actual life, which is outside the concentration camps, and it reads more or less like self help, which I'm okay with. I don't like self help too much, but in this case, given the extreme circumstances, I can definitely give that a pass. The second part especially reads more like a philosophy book as well, apart from self-help, where the author argues with other philosophers instead of you know uh, putting his point forward, which he does, but he doesn't hammer it in like some other self-help books. He more or less argues with other philosophers, be it Kant, Freud, or Nietzsche. He battles with their ideas. I'll give a brief overview of Kant just to take an example. They say that the value of your life is assigned by the reason and morality you live by. If you don't have a reason, if you don't have morality or moral ethics, I think that's the name of the book Kant wrote, uh, principles of moral ethics or something. If you don't have morality, if you don't have a reason, which can be transcribed as level-headedness, causality in the crudest of possible ways, that gives you value to your life. Now, look at how Frankl will debate or combat this idea of placing value on morality and reason. And this is one of my favorite quotes from the book. It's a bit of a longer one. Here it goes. Quote: but today's society is characterized by achievement orientation, and consequently, it adores people who are successful and happy. And in particular, it adores the young. It virtually ignores the value of all those who are otherwise, and in doing so, blurs the decisive difference between being valuable in the sense of dignity and being valuable in the sense of usefulness. If one is not cognizant of this difference and holds that an individual's value stems only from his present usefulness, then believe me, one owes it only to personal inconsistency not to plead for euthanasia along the lines of Hitler's program, that is to say, mercy killing of all those who have lost their social usefulness, be it because of old age, incurable illness, mental deterioration, or whatever handicap they may suffer. Confounding the dignity of man with mere usefulness arises from conceptual confusion that in turn may be traced back to the contemporary nihilism transmitted on many an academic campus and many an analytical couch. End quote. That is to say that it is easy to espouse values sitting from an armchair, but I am the living embodiment of suffering, and I am telling you that giving value to usefulness is not right. Value the suffering, value your experiences. You have something that others don't. You have realities in your past that you have lived through, and you can teach it to other people. That will give you value, not how useful you are in the sense of the word, which is the work you do, let's say, or how much capital you are making by your work. And you should not derive your sense of dignity from the work you do. It's from your experiences that you should get your dignity. And today's society will do well to learn from older people than to chide them and take them for granted and treat them as useless. They have suffered more, they have not possibilities but realities in their past. Again, it's hard to argue against this because it is so real. There is not a single point that I could come up with that would deny any part of this argument. So I was forced to give it to him that he is right in this instance. I may disagree with the author on love, on religion, but not on this. Okay, what else do we have? Let's see. Freud, we discussed a bit of that. Yeah, life's meaning changes with the person, the time. So, again, one of the minor points in the book is that there is no ultimate meaning in life. Surprise, surprise. There is the meaning changes from person to person, from time to time, because you yourself change. That is one aspect. And then times change, society changes, so the meaning that you are aiming towards will change with time and with you. And the only thing you can do, how do you find this meaning? Where do I go? Can I search Google for the meaning of life? You can't. You have to answer it for yourself. But does it come from within you? No, even no there as well. So where is it? Where is this meaning? And for that, the author does not have a right answer. And again, there is no right answer, obviously. And this book cannot tell you what that meaning is. Again, surprise, surprise. But what the author says is that you yourself can do some exercises that will help you find this meaning in your life. And one thing that I took away from this book is that you should be looking for the meaning of life from life. Did I make sense there? There is no meaning that will come from within you, but you have to be ready for it. You have to be responsible when that meaning arrives to you from life. And that meaning can arrive, as I mentioned previously, from a person walking into your life, which will be love, which will give you meaning. It will be from a work opportunity that you are presented with, that will give you meaning. But all of these, and again, these are only a few ways in which meaning presents itself to you, but the only thing you can do is act responsibly when that opportunity shows up. This is more along the terms of Jordan Peterson, and how he says that you have to be responsible for your own self. You have to, again, not to push a meme too hard, but you have to make your bed and clean your room. That is to say, you have to act responsible for your own self, and you have to be open to the meaning of life, walking into your life from life. I hope that made somewhat of a sense. And I also wanted to say a quick thing about suffering. It is true that suffering can give meaning, but again, it is not necessary. And the author says that if you can avoid the suffering, then avoid it, and then you can find meaning elsewhere. But even if you have to suffer, if you have no other choice, then even in that suffering, you will find meaning. And he gives a excellent example of this guy whose wife had just passed, and this is an old guy, 80 something, let's say, and his wife passed 2 years ago, and he still couldn't get over it, and he is suffering every single day. He comes to our doctor, the good author, and again explains his situation, and the doctor asks a single question, or he proposes a single idea. Why don't you imagine it like this? If your wife was to live past your death, would you want your wife to suffer like you are suffering now? The guy says, no, I saved my wife all of this suffering, and I am suffering because I don't want her to suffer. And that is the meaning of his suffering, to stop his wife from suffering. And this is just a small example that I remember off the top of my head. I'm sure I butchered the actual text there, but you get what I'm saying, that even in suffering you can find meaning. And this again is very touching and something that I will remember in my own sufferings. That happiness can be found in the darkest of times if only one remembers to turn on the candles or lights, whatever that Harry Potter quote is. I can't wait for the TV show to come out. Anyway, what else do we have here? Mm, combat suffering through optimism, love, and faith. Yeah, that's fair again. I don't have much to add to that. Let's see what else do we have. I have some other very poignant quotes that I liked. I'll just read them off very quickly. Quote, but there was no need to be ashamed of tears, for tears bore witness that a man had the greatest of courage, the courage to suffer. End quote. Quote, the one thing you can't take away from me is the way I choose to respond to what you do to me. The last of one's freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given circumstance. End quote. Quote, the salvation of man is through love and in love. End quote. Quote, instead of possibilities, I have realities in my past. Not only the realities of work done and of love loved, but of sufferings bravely suffered. End quote. Quote, a man's concern, even his despair over the worthwhileness of life, is an existential distress, but by no means a mental disease. End quote. See how interesting that is, that it's okay to cry about not having a meaning, cry about not finding your purpose, or not finding the thing you love, or not finding the love of your life even. You can cry about that, but that doesn't mean that you have a mental disease. That isn't what depression is. That isn't what anxiety is. That is this existential vacuum, a product of society, but that is not a mental disease. It is what makes you human, but it is not a mental disease. Very interesting. Again, something that I will remember forever. Okay, let's quickly go through my notes. I have some Kindle highlights that I wanted to read. Again, this part of the review will be more or less quotes from the book that I've saved. So here goes. Quote, there are things which must cause you to lose your reason or you have none to lose. An abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal behavior. End quote. Quote, the truth that love is the ultimate and the highest goal to which man can aspire. Then I grasped the meaning of the greatest secret that human poetry and human thought and belief have to impart. The salvation of man is through love and in love. I understood how a man who has nothing left in this world still may know bliss, be it only for a brief moment, in the contemplation of his beloved. In a position of utter desolation, when man cannot express himself in positive action, when his only achievement may consist in enduring his sufferings in the right way, an honorable way, in such a position, man can, through loving contemplation of the image he carries of his beloved, achieve fulfillment. End quote. Now that's just brilliant. I don't have anything against that. Quote, a man who let himself decline because he could not see any future goal found himself occupied with retrospective thoughts. In a different connection, we have already spoken of the tendency there was to look into the past to help make the present, with all its horrors, less real. But in robbing the present of its reality, there lay a certain danger. It became easy to overlook the opportunities to make something positive of camp life, opportunities which really did exist. Regarding our provisional existence was unreal was in itself an important factor in causing the prisoners to lose their hold on life. Everything, in a way, became pointless. Such people forgot that often it is just such an exceptionally difficult external situation which gives man the opportunity to grow spiritually beyond himself. Instead of taking the camp's difficulties as a test of their inner strength, they did not take their life seriously and despised it as something of no consequence. They preferred to close their eyes and to live in the past. Life for such people became meaningless. End quote. Quote, What man actually needs is not a tensionless state, but rather the striving and struggling for a worthwhile goal, a freely chosen task. What he needs is not the discharge of tension at any cost, but the call of a potential meaning waiting to be fulfilled by him. End quote. There is just one more quote. There is ample empirical evidence that the three facets of this syndrome, depression, aggression, addiction, are due to what is called in logotherapy the existential vacuum, a feeling of emptiness and meaninglessness. End quote. These were my favorite parts from the book. There are many more ideas that I could talk about, but in the interest of time and not wasting your time, I'll stop here. I'm obviously very interested, as is anyone else, in the meaning of life. So if you have any further comments or want to discuss this book in particular, I'm all for it. Thank you for listening.